Welcome, deep divers. Today, we're taking a really fascinating plunge back in time,
Yeah.
into the world of the unexplained.
Yeah, what have we got?
Our source is the Desert Rat newsletter, specifically issue #38 from November 7, 1997.
Okay, 1997.
What's really interesting here isn't just its age. This issue actually marred the publication's return after being gone for, over a year.
Ah, a comeback issue.
Exactly. And it signaled a whole new philosophy for the rat. And right at the heart of this comeback issue is a review.
A review of what?
A book by a former Air Force Technical Sergeant, Dan Sherman. It's called Above Black, Project Preserve Destiny.
Above Black. Okay, that sounds intriguing already.
Oh, it is. It presents this really unique account of, alleged alien communication.
Alien communication, wow.
So for our deep dive today, we're going to unpack these pretty wild claims, alien government collusion, psychic abilities, secret projects.
Whole 9 yards.
Pretty much. And we'll explore how the Desert Rat itself looked at it. They were critical, definitely, but also, you could tell, really intrigued by these extraordinary stories.
Sounds great. Where do we start? With the newsletter's return.
Let's do that. Let's get into it.
Okay, so that reemergence, it's quite a story in itself, actually.
How so?
Well, the Desert Rat describes its own transformation really vividly. They talk about evolving from a, quote, humble worm into a bigger worm.
A bigger worm, okay.
Yeah, moving from childhood into full-blown adolescence, as they put it.
Right.
And part of this shift meant shedding its really intense focus on that, that unnamed Nevada desert facility.
The famous one, Area 51, basically, though they didn't name it.
Exactly, which the newsletter says gave us life, but eventually became a burden.
Interesting.
They even explicitly state the base is now purged from our title. It sounds almost like a, defiant symbol of their coming of age.
So they're growing up, moving beyond just the base. That's a pretty big shift.
It really is.
So what about this new rat philosophy, then? What did that actually mean? How did it change how they covered this stuff?
Well, it's a genuinely interesting philosophical shift, especially for a publication like this.
Mm-hmm.
Their core belief, they said, now centers on the idea that truth is relative.
Relative truth. How did they explain that?
They argued that, absolute permanent truth is kind of elusive because, quote, science, technology, and current affairs are changing too fast.
Okay, so things move too quickly for absolute certainty.
Right, so instead of chasing that absolute truth, they aim to find a better truth. One that's, superior to other theories for a specific purpose.
A better truth.
And this new rat declared its intention to explore the unknown, conduct ridiculous mind experiments.
Ridiculous mind experiments.
Yeah, and then, interestingly, bring whatever we find back to Earth and somehow integrate it with our mundane personal lives.
Wow, okay, so connect the weird stuff to everyday life.
Exactly. They also embraced no prior restraint on subjects, launched a big new website for UFOs and paranormal stuff, open for contributions too.
So opening things up.
Yeah, and they even said pretty upfront they intended to perpetuate myths and distort current affairs to illustrate political and philosophical points.
Whoa, okay, that's bold. Perpetuate myths.
Yeah, but they added they'd still focus on UFO and paranormal claims with restraint and look for substantial connections to our life on Earth.
That's quite a statement for a newsletter, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like they're leaning into storytelling almost to make points, not just dry reporting.
Very much so. Narrative seems key.
And that brings us right to one of the first big stories this revamped Desert Rat tackled, this book review.
Right, the Sherman book.
You can tell they really appreciate a good story, quite apart from its relative truth, as they'd say.
Definitely.
What's interesting is how they set the stage for Dan Sherman's book. They contrasted it with another one first, right? Colonel Philip Corso's book.
Yeah, Corso's Roswell Revelations.
And the Desert Rat, they admitted Corso's book left them feeling more queasy than entertained. Why was that?
Well, their main critique was that Corso presented himself as, quote, too large a figure.
Too large, meaning?
He claimed to have basically brokered dozens of huge technological breakthroughs from recovered alien tech things like microwaves, fiber optics, even integrated circuits like computer chips.
Wow, that's a massive claim.
Exactly. They felt it was just too sweeping. Plus, they said he offered few leads to follow up on.
So no way to really check it.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And his account lacked human details or any unexpected twists. It felt flat to them.
So not a compelling narrative for them.
Not at all. The review literally says they chucked the book and turned on The Simpsons.
Okay. That says it all, really.
Ah.
So how did Dan Sherman's book, Above Black, stack up against that? How was this narrative?
Well, it was a very different beast. For one, it had a really low-key release.
Okay.
And Sherman, unlike Corso, does not portray himself as a central figure in world history. He's not claiming he changed everything.
Much smaller scale, then.
Yeah, and The Desert Rat really highlighted its originality. They called it a new synthesis of popular themes.
Such as?
Things like alien abduction, genetic manipulation, government cover-up, alien government collusion, and also those growing categories back then of remote viewing and psychokinesis.
Right. Remote viewing, seeing things far away with your mind.
Yeah.
And psychokinesis, moving stuff with your mind.
Exactly. That's the gist of it. And The Desert Rat made this really bold prediction.
What was that?
They said that Sherman's book, regardless of its veracity, so whether it was true or not, would have a significant impact on the direction of the UFO movement, much more so than Corso's.
Wow. That is a bold prediction, especially given Corso's high profile. Okay, let's dive into Sherman's actual story then. The Desert Rat called it refreshingly simple. What did he claim happened?
Okay, so Sherman's account is basically this. He was an Air Force technical sergeant. He was on a, pretty routine electronic intelligence course at NSA headquarters.
NSA, National Security Agency, at Fort Meade, Maryland.
Okay, right. But then came the not-so-routine part, an evening training program focused on communicating with aliens.
Wait, just like that. An evening class on alien communication.
That's the story. He was allegedly told he had a special intuitive ability.
An ability. Where did that come from?
Get this. It was supposedly genetically engineered by aliens during his mother's abduction back in the early 1960s.
Whoa, okay. So aliens abducted his mom and tinkered with genetics to give him this ability later.
That's the claim. His training involved these exercises in front of a computer terminal designed to sort of turn on this ability.
And did it work, according to him?
Apparently, yes. Within months, he says he was receiving comms, communications from extraterrestrial entities.
What kind of comms?
Two types, mainly. Coded alphanumeric transmissions, just strings of letters and numbers, and also direct conversations with two aliens he nicknamed Spock and Bones.
Spock and Bones, seriously. Like Star Trek.
Yep, Spock and Bones. He apparently never saw the aliens, though, and he was kept largely in the dark about the big picture, just acting as a, quote, communications officer.
That is quite a story. So he's just typing into a blank screen, having these supposed chats.
That was his primary task, yeah. Typing communications into a blank window on his workstation.
And what was the point? What was Project Preserve Destiny actually for, according to this?
He was told the purpose was to develop a backup communication method. Because supposedly, at some point in Earth's future, all electromagnetic communication would be disrupted.
Like a solar flare or EMP or something worse.
They didn't specify, which makes it even more unsettling. The Desert Rat called this the most terrifying revelation of all.
I can see why. So what about the training itself? You mentioned exercises.
Yeah, the session sounded pretty unique. Sherman would face a computer terminal, but without touching it.
Yeah.
His task was to mentally flatten a series of sine wave graphs shown on the screen. Smooth out the wavy lines just by thinking about it. Like mind over matter, psychokinesis.
Exactly. Very reminiscent of PK research. And apparently Sherman achieved near 100% success once his abilities clicked.
Oh, okay.
He then moved on to correlating photos and video clips with their intuitive equivalents, whatever that means.
Vague.
Yeah. Later, he says he was transferred to somewhere called PPD Base #1.
PPD for Project Preserve Destiny, I guess. Any idea where that was?
Nope, the book never says. Just PPD Base #1. There he held a conventional top-secret job analyzing radar emissions.
A day job, basically.
Right, a cover job.
Yeah.
But he was still receiving these above-black communications on the side, mostly undeciphered numbers and letters.
Still in the dark.
Mostly. But then there was this hiccup moment, as the book calls it. He somehow achieved a higher level of communication.
Meaning
He could actually ask his alien contacts direct questions. Spock and Bones.
Finally getting some answers. What did he learn?
Well, not a huge amount. The details were limited. He described them as strictly business grays, the classic image. Yeah, the big-headed, gray-skinned guys.
Right. But apparently with a reserved sense of humor and an abrupt manner, they'd just cut off the conversation if they didn't want to answer something.
Yeah. What else? Any biology? History?
A little. Their lifespan is similar to ours. They have male and female sexes. They eliminate waste, but not in the same way. Very vague. And they claimed to have visited Earth for a long time, impacting at least 3 cultures, but didn't say which ones.
So tantalizing details, but still mostly mysterious.
Very much so. Strictly business, like you said.
Okay, so you have this really technical, supposedly top secret project, and then aliens nicknamed Spock and Bones. It's quite a mix.
It really is.
The Desert Rat obviously appreciated the narrative, like we said, but how did they actually rate the book's storytelling overall?
Well, they were critical there. They said it was not the best material.
How so?
They compared it to just the first 5 minutes of an X-Files episode. You know, riveting, but without enough conflict to sustain a whole show.
Huh, okay, I get that. Intriguing setup, but maybe not enough plot.
Exactly. They openly wished for more details, like where did the aliens come from? What was their real agenda? Or, who killed JFK? They wanted more juice.
That's fair criticism from a storytelling perspective, but I think you mentioned something earlier, the Desert Rat's take on Sherman himself as a writer, or rather, not a writer.
Yes, exactly. That's the flip side. They pointed out that Sherman does not come across as a fiction writer.
Meaning?
He resists many opportunities to make the story more sensational. He doesn't add car chases or evil villains or anything like that.
Right.
He provides what they called an unadorned, dramatically incomplete account.
And that lack of polish, that lack of trying to make it super dramatic.
Paradoxically, it suggested a degree of authenticity to The Desert Rat. It didn't feel like a fabricated thriller.
Interesting.
They even mentioned the side detail. There was a failed word-of-mouth publishing email pyramid scheme trying to sell the book.
Oh?
Yeah, but it wasn't Sherman's doing. And he eventually pulled the plug on it himself and issued refunds, which, again, seemed to underscore the sort of non-sensational, maybe even reluctant nature of the book's release. He wasn't trying to hype it to the moon.
That really does add a layer, doesn't it? Suggests he wasn't primarily in it for a quick buck or fame.
Seems that way, yeah.
Okay, so beyond the story itself, what about that subliminal influence the Desert Rat predicted? How did they think this book could subtly change the UFO and abduction movements?
Right, this was a key part of their analysis. They looked at how abduction narratives had evolved over time.
How so?
Well, from early stories focusing just on missing time.
Right, people losing hours they couldn't account for.
To later, more complex claims involving genetic experiments, taking sperm or eggs, creating hybrids, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Sherman's story, they argued, adds this new potential layer. The idea that the aliens are genetically preparing our offspring for psychic communication later in life.
Connecting the genetic tinkering directly to future psychic abilities, like Sherman claimed he had.
Precisely. And the Desert Rat predicted this specific idea would start showing up more commonly in abduction accounts.
Interesting prediction. Did they connect it to anything else?
Yeah, they linked it to the growing acceptance, even back then, of psychic phenomena like information exchange and remote viewing. Especially because it later came out that the NSA and military did actually run their own remote viewing programs during the Cold War, like Project Stargate.
Right, that was declassified event.
Exactly. Which, the Desert Rat suggested, makes Sherman's claims about government-run psychic communication training seem, well, not that absurd in comparison.
It gives it a sliver of plausibility, maybe?
A sliver, yeah. And crucially, Sherman's account stressed that he showed no psychic ability outside of those controlled conditions.
What's the significance of that?
It implies the aliens were sort of the dominant force in the communication. It wasn't just him being naturally psychic. It was enabled or maybe controlled by them during the sessions.
Okay. And what about government cover-up angle? Did Sherman's story add anything new there?
The Desert Rat thought so. They pointed out a new subtlety suggested by Sherman's account. The idea of using collateral black projects.
Collateral projects, meaning?
Like having a real conventional top secret project, in Sherman's case, radar analysis running alongside the truly bizarre alien stuff.
So the secret radar work provides the security cover, the building, the personnel slots.
Exactly. It provides a plausible cover story and utilizes existing security structures.
The benefit of that is?
It makes it really hard to prosecute someone like Sherman if they talk, because to discuss the non-existent aliens, they might also have to divulge details about the very real, conventional top-secret project they were officially assigned to.
A kind of built-in protection for the really weird stuff. Clever, if true.
A catch-22 for whistleblowers, essentially. That's how the Desert Rat saw it.
Okay, that's a really interesting point about the potential mechanics of a cover-up. But speaking of the government side, the Desert Rat had some some pretty strong skepticism, right? Not about the aliens necessarily, but about the human side of Project Preserve Destiny.
Oh, absolutely. They were quite scathing about the human management described in the book.
What was their main issue?
It centered on Sherman's profound isolation and unhappiness. He apparently had, quote, no one he could talk to about his experiences.
That does sound rough, dealing with alien comms and having no support.
Right. The desert rat found this unthinkable. They questioned how anyone could invest so many resources, both human and supposedly alien, into a project and provide zero psychological support.
Yeah, that seems like asking for trouble.
They basically described the project's human management as completely inept, so obsessed with secrecy, quote, that nothing could survive within it.
Any specific examples of this ineptitude?
Sherman described supervisors who seemed like they were just reciting from a script. One supervisor apparently wasn't even aware of briefings Sherman had received previously. Total lack of continuity.
Yikes. Disconnected.
Yeah. And his last supervisor was described as purely incompetent. This supervisor refused Sherman's request to resign from the special project.
Refused. Can they do that?
Well, this supervisor apparently added a sort of mafia-like assertion that Sherman could never leave, just couldn't get out.
Wow. That's heavy.
Yeah. And according to the Desert Rat, though, this detail wasn't explicitly in Sherman's book itself, but something they gathered, perhaps this interaction is what prompted Sherman to seek a discharge from the Air Force at any cost.
How did he manage that if they wouldn't let him resign the project?
The newsletter mentions he ended up falsely claiming homosexuality to get discharged back when that was grounds for dismissal.
Whoa. Okay, so he was that desperate to get away from the project and its management?
That's the implication the Desert Rat drew. That the human element, the management, was so bad it drove him to extreme measures.
It's almost bizarrely validating, in a way. The sheer incompetence of the human oversight makes the alien story itself seem, well, maybe not more believable, but you can kind of see how such a weird project could exist if the managers were that clueless or dysfunctional.
It's a strange dynamic, isn't it? The mundane failure makes the extraordinary seem slightly less impossible.
Yeah. Which brings us, I guess, to the big question. Veracity. Did Sherman make it all up? Did the Desert Rat come to any conclusions?
Well, they definitely grappled with it. They acknowledged that Sherman's basic Air Force position and his military credentials seemed solid, seemed genuine.
Okay, so his service record checked out.
Apparently so. But, they added, the alien portion of his resume is a different story. That rests almost entirely on his testimony alone.
No hard evidence, no corroborating witnesses mentioned in the book, presumably.
Right, so the Desert Rat went through the possibilities. Why might someone fabricate a story like this?
Money, attention.
Those are the obvious ones they considered. But they weighed that against Sherman's consistently low-key and non-sensational presentation.
The fact he didn't try to jazz it up.
Exactly. They argued he could have done a lot better if fabrication was the goal. He could have added sinister guards, midnight abductions, men in black, maybe tried peddling supposed alien technology.
But he didn't. He stuck to his relatively dry, incomplete account.
Right, which made the simple motive of fame and fortune seem less likely to them.
So what other possibilities did they consider?
Well, maybe a government disinformation ploy, although why release this particular story wasn't clear, or perhaps subtle psychological forces at work within Sherman himself, maybe some kind of delusion or misinterpretation.
Okay.
Ultimately, the Desert Rat admitted there was no obvious answer right now. They couldn't definitively say if it was true, false, or something in between.
So ambiguity reigns.
Pretty much. But they concluded with this overall sense of satisfaction. They felt Sherman had stuck to the facts as he saw them and had created a story worthy of attention.
Even if they couldn't verify it.
Even then, he delivered, in their words, a new mystery. And interestingly, they credit his story with prompting their own revival, bringing the Desert Rat back to life.
What a journey this deep dive has been, seriously. Through Dan Sherman's really extraordinary claims and the Desert Rat's incredibly insightful and, yeah, sometimes pretty funny review.
It's a fascinating piece of history from that scene, definitely.
And this source, this newsletter issue, it really embodies what we try to do here on the deep dive, doesn't it?
How so?
The unique blend of, specific, really detailed claims, sometimes way out there claims, alongside sharp, critical analysis. Trying to get to the heart of complex information, even when it dives into the truly bizarre.
Absolutely. And I think it reinforces that idea that, even without definitive proof, stories like Sherman's, they really do shape our understanding or maybe our questioning of the unknown.
Yeah, they influence the culture, the narratives around UFOs, psychic stuff, all of that.
For sure. And remember, the desert rat itself, with its new philosophy back then, was looking for a better truth in a world where they felt absolute truth was, well, elusive.
Right. That relative truth idea.
So maybe the final thought for you listening is this. When you're faced with claims like these, claims that defy easy verification, how do you decide what counts as a better truth? Especially when you try to consider the motivations or maybe the lack of obvious motivations of the people sharing these really extraordinary stories. What standard do you use then?